heart of your system.
Hello, Briony here from Kit Guru, and in this video I'm taking a look at the Aerocool GLO case that I've got beside me here. It retails around the £70 price mark, so it's not crazy expensive. I know we have seen some cases coming up this year that are like more towards the £200 price point, but it's not a super cheap case either. It's not like £30–40. Sort of hits like right in the middle, so I think there's probably quite a few people out there that might be looking for a case at this particular price point. This is like my first impressions of the case. Basically, I haven't put any components and stuff in it yet. That will come later on in the video. This is while the case is empty, just so I can sort of like show you around it and tell you a little bit about it, which is easier to do when it's not full of all the components that I'm going to use. So to start off, it is a mid-tower size case. It's got a width of 210mm, a height of 475mm, and a depth of 478mm. And aesthetically, to me, it's just sort of like a big black box. It looks very similar to a lot of cases that are already on the market. Big black metal construction, a giant tempered glass side panel, and a couple of RGB strips that run down the front of the case as well. Hopefully they're going to light up and look quite beautiful when I've got some components in here. So at Computex, if you think all the way back to June, I actually saw this case in white and I really thought it was a very attractive case. Obviously I've got the black version here next to me. It's not currently available in white in the UK, even though I did definitely prefer the white version of this case, but I am told it will be coming in the near future if you are a fan of white computer components like I am. So starting with the front of the case, that's where you're going to find your different buttons. So up top there is a power button, there is a button which allows you to change between the different LED lighting effects, which we'll play around a bit later. There's two USB 3 ports, there's a headphone jack and a microphone jack as well. On the side, obviously, one of the big attractions of this case, it's got this giant tempered glass side panel. And if I just sort of like show you how it comes off, because it has got a little bit of a party trick. So you just sort of unscrew the screws like halfway, and then it has got this like inbuilt hinge into it, so you can sort of hinge it open. I did find though it's not the most smooth, like you can't just fling it open because it does sort of unhinge quite easily. The clasps on the end don't always sort of like latch into place, and you do have to be a little bit careful, but I thought it was quite cool. It means you can sort of show it off, I guess, if you ever want to do that. Just open your side panel as much as you want to. It means it's, yeah, basically quite easy to take on and off, whereas normally I find with like tempered glass side panels you've got to sort of take 4 screws out, but with this one you've still only got 2.
Many people don't appreciate the importance of a good power supply. A bad power supply can take out your motherboard, might even take out your processor. Seasonic has won more awards from Kit Guru over the past 10 years than any other company. Kit Guru recommends Seasonic.
So on the inside, you'll notice down the bottom here, there is nowhere to put the power supply. And that's because in this case, behind this shroud at the top here, is actually where you put the power supply. So it always feels like the case has been flipped on its head. I've never actually built in a case before that's put the power supply at the top. So I'm quite interested to see how practical it's going to be when I've got some components in here. If we take a look at the back of the case, you'll notice that it's fitted with a 120mm black Aerocool fan as like the exhaust fan on the case, and it is actually the only fan that this case comes with sort of by default. I did find it to be a little bit disappointing. I mean, it is a £70 case, so I've sort of like, maybe you could throw in a couple of extra fans, but I guess it does mean you're not paying for any fans that you're not going to use if you're only going to replace some sort of like fancy RGB fans anyway. In general, the cooling options are actually pretty good. Because you haven't got the power supply in the bottom, you can have 3 120mm fans down there or a 360mm radiator. There is space for 2 120mm fans in the front, or you can have a 240mm radiator on sort of like the back of the motherboard tray, or of course a further 2 120mm fans. I did find though the design, like at the moment the airflow looks a little bit dodgy to me. The front of the case doesn't have any like noticeable air vents, so I'm not sure where any sort of like airflow is going to get in. It just seems to be like straight up metal. There's no like grill, there's no sort of like slits where air can really get through. Hopefully it's not going to be a problem, but we'll find out when I've got some components in there. So now I'm going to flip this case around so we can take a look at the back. Ooh. You'll notice that there is quite a lot of air vents on this back side panel. I think that is going to help quite a lot if you're going to fit like a 240mm radiator on the back of the motherboard tray, or if you're going to fit some like extra fans. I think it is really the only place for air to get in the front of this case. It's got 2 thumb screws on the back, which I'll just remove now. And the side panel itself does seem to come off reasonably easy. It's quite sturdy as well. It definitely feels like it's got a decent amount of weight to it. So now I've got the side panel. If we can see behind this PSU shroud up the top here, and you can see there's plenty, seems to be plenty of space to get a decent sized power supply in there. There's a decent amount of room so I can get all my cables threaded nicely. And then you've got a hard drive bay here as well. And this case can take up to 3.5 inch drives or up to 5 SSDs. You can't have them all at the same time. It sort of depends which configuration you're going to go for, but I think it probably should be enough for most people. What I really like is that all the I/O cables are coated in a black plastic. I really hate it when these cables are just like rainbow cables, because you know this case has got a window and you know people are going to see them, and to me it just looks bad. But yeah, nicely coated in black plastic, so that makes me happy. In general, I think the cable management should be pretty straightforward. We'll find out when I've got some components in here, but there seems to be a decent amount of well-placed holes and places to put cable ties through. And what I really like is that the 3 big holes here have got rubber grommets on, so not only does that look a bit nicer, but it also is going to keep the cables protected as well from any sort of like possible sharp edges. However, I think the overall build quality of this case, when I've been looking at it while it's empty at the moment, it seems to be pretty well built. It's definitely got a good amount of weight to it. It's a very solid metal construction. And there isn't anywhere that sort of like feels a little bit wobbly or cheap or anything. It in general does feel like a well-built case, and I'm quite excited to get some components in here. So through the power of editing, let's fast forward in time and find out how if I enjoyed building in this case and how well it performs. So now I've got the GLO case full of lots of lovely components, and here's a full list of everything that I opted to use in this build. What I can say is I absolutely love this case now. When I originally took a look at it when it was empty, I was just like, it's just another black box. But I think now all the components are in, that LED lighting strip is lit up, and I put a couple of spare RGB fans in there. I think it does look really sexy. I'm just trying to imagine, I really wish I had some more spare fans so I could put 3 along the bottom, because I think they would look really beautiful, sort of like shining through the tempered glass. I'm actually going to remove the tempered glass now. Now we've seen it in all of its glory, it does actually reflect quite badly back onto the camera. So I'm going to take off so we can take a closer look at everything inside, and you're not just seeing a reflection of my living room. So down the bottom, I didn't mention while it was empty, if you are going to put 3 fans down there, there's also a dust filter, and it's pretty easy to remove, and I think that's definitely going to help to stop those extra fans pulling in any excess dust. So continuing with the lighting, this strip on the front here, I've got it set to like the rainbow wave effect. I think that's personally my favourite, but there is actually 13 different settings to choose between, which you can switch between using the button on top. So there's like several different wave effects to choose between. I think there's like 6 of those, various ones that cycle between different colours and different sort of like flashing and stuff. And then there's also several different static effects to choose between as well. But like I said, the sort of like rainbow wave effect is personally my favourite. If that's not enough customization for you and you want even more options when it comes to the lighting on this case, it does actually have digital LEDs as well. So that means that on the front of the case there's like an RGB header, and you can plug that into the RGB header on your motherboard. So my particular motherboard, it does have the Aura Sync RGB header, so you can use it with software, but for this case it requires the 3-pin 5V RGB header, not the 12V 4-pin header that I have on my motherboard. So if you do want to use that particular feature of this case, make sure that you have a motherboard that is compatible and you're not plugging it into the wrong header, as that could probably cause some sort of fire. I imagine 12 volts into 5 volts probably isn't going to end well. When it came to installing the components, I actually really enjoyed building in this case. There was nothing about it that made me like annoyed or frustrated, and in general it's just like a very pleasant experience. It's basically what you want when you're building a PC. You don't want anything that's like trying to make it a harder process than it has to be, basically. You get in the box, you get a little manual. It is like a pretty basic manual. I wouldn't recommend trying to build a PC for the first time using this, but it is kind of good to have as a reference if you get a little bit stuck along the way. You also get this brown box. This is what was hiding in the hard drive bay up the top. So you get some tweezers. You also get all the screws and stuff you need for like your motherboard, power supply, hard drives and things, etc. And down the bottom here, if I can dig it out, there we go. You also get a badge for the front of the case. So it's a little Aerocool silver badge. This is actually a spare that they seem to have chucked in. I put one on the front of the case. It's just like a little sticker. I tried to put it on as straight and as in the center as I could. It's probably a little bit wonky. But yeah, it's a nice little touch to it because the front did look a little bit plain. Yeah, that's good that it comes with that anyway. Oh god, I've just thrown it everywhere. And then when it came to installing the components, the power supply went in the top really easy. I was a little bit apprehensive because I hadn't built in a case where the power supply goes at the top before. But yeah, really easy to put into place. There was plenty of clearance underneath that top shroud to get the 8-pin for the CPU power in. And there was also enough space to sort of like maneuver the motherboard in. The standoffs for the motherboard were already installed in the case, which I really like because I hate trying to screw all the little fiddly things into place. And also the PCIe slot covers on the back where you install the graphics cards, those are really easy to remove because they weren't those sort of like horrible snap-off ones. When it came to installing the 2 RGB fans, I must admit that I was slightly baffled at first. I was looking at the back plate and I was like, where are the holes for my fans? I can't see anywhere for fans to go. There's just holes for hard drives and SSDs. But once I actually realised there's 4 screws in this little panel, and then it comes out of the case, and then there is a nice big hole behind there where you've got all the slots you need to screw in 2 120mm fans. And suddenly, like, the design of this case suddenly made sense to me, and why it has that big grill in the back panel, and it's so you've got like all those fans can chuck lots of air through the case, and they actually do a pretty good job. Like when I put my hand on the back of the side panel, I can definitely feel those fans pushing the air out of the case, and I definitely think that's going to help with airflow. Also, I think it looks really nice as well. With some cases you have like that random empty void sort of at the front where like the drive bays used to be, but the cases are kind of changed and people don't use DVDs anymore, and they just sort of like left the space empty. But in this case they've actually put it to use it as a way to help cool the case, which I think is really good and helps it look more attractive. So I've now flipped the case around so we can take a look at what's sort of like going on behind the scenes, so to speak. And what I did notice while I was building is that this back panel is actually also on a hinge, which I think is quite neat. It's not just the front tempered glass panel that's on a hinge. You can actually like unhinge this back panel as well. So now we've got it off. Woo, I'm getting a breeze from those fans. Now we've got it off, you can see up the top here that there is a good amount of place to put all those like extra length from the power supply cables, and then there's also a decent amount of clearance as well. Overall, in general, I actually found cable managing this case pretty straightforward. I didn't have to spend too much time cable tying everything into place to make sure that that side panel went back on, as it went back on really easily first time, which is unusual for me because normally it's a case of like jamming it in there. And The only sort of issue I had is that the clearance for the SSD is quite tight. I had it on another case that I recently reviewed. I think it was one from Antec, and for some reason, the way they've designed the tray that the SSD goes onto is that there is not really much room to get those SATA cables in there, but it does sort of squeeze on eventually. You just have to be a little bit patient with it. A big plus for me as well is that the LEDs are powered by a SATA power cable. You don't need a horrible Molex connector. I hate having to use cables in a case that I don't need just to like power the fans or power the LEDs, so that was definitely a big plus for me. And in general, cable management and things going on in the back of this case is very good. All the slots are in really helpful places, and all the areas where you can thread cable ties through are also in good spots. It looks like you can also take out the hard drive bay as well if you need a little bit of extra space up the top here. All the rubber grommets are a good size, all the cables fit through really easily. What I really like as well is that down the bottom here, I think the slots are designed for if you have fans on the bottom of the case, but I found them really good for threading like those front header cables through, you know, like the audio cable and like the USB 3 connector and things. They're all positioned really nicely for that. And then if you also fit front fans as well, there's a couple that are positioned, and I think a lot of thought in general has gone into this case and ways in which they can make it easier for you to cable manage it, which is really good. So obviously there is no point in this case looking all pretty, fancy and attractive if it performs like an absolute potato, but thankfully a potato it is not. I can't really judge it too much on the noise levels because I did actually add a couple of those extra RGB fans in there, but I haven't really noticed any problems. The supplied black Aerocool fan that comes with the case doesn't create any unnecessary noise. It obviously isn't a silent case, it doesn't have any like sound deadening material or anything, but I really don't think you're going to have a problem. You should be quite happy if it's sat on the desk next to you. I definitely didn't find it annoying. When it comes to the temperatures, I tested this case by doing my usual test. I ran AIDA64 for 10 minutes, and they also had a pretty hardcore gaming session as well, just to make sure that those temperatures are representative of what you can expect in like a real world scenario, because don't imagine everyone's going to be running AIDA64 day to day. Basically, so the maximum temperatures that I saw, the CPU got up to 53 degrees and the GPU got up to 71 degrees, and that is basically like a big thumbs up. Everything stays nice and cool. Originally when I took a look at this case when it was empty, I was slightly worried about the cooling performance because I didn't really see anywhere for airflow to get into the case, but it seems there is nothing to worry about. These two fans that I've added in work perfectly well with that vent on the back of the case, and have to remember as well, this case currently has 3 fans in, and if you wanted you could add a further 5 fans, so I definitely think there's going to be no problems with cooling. So overall, what did I think of this case? Basically, I absolutely love it, and this isn't even the white version. I really hope they bring out the white version soon because I think it is absolutely beautiful. It is a great case to look at. I really like the unique design that they've gone for, having the power supply at the top, allowing for extra fans and things in the bottom. I think it definitely makes it stand out more from other cases around this particular price point. The tempered glass window is great, and of course I love the RGB lighting as well. It performs well also, it's great to build in, it keeps everything nice and cool and quiet, and it also comes at a reasonable price as well. I think Aerocool have done a really great job, so a big thumbs up to Aerocool. In general, I think it has really raised my expectations on what to expect from a case at this price point. If you like this video from KitGuru, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more from KitGuru, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and there's also a bell icon on there as well, so you can get a notification every time a new video goes live. I'm trying to make— oh! It tried to eat my hair!